The rain fell in steady sheets against the windshield as I drove through the narrow streets of Lyon, wipers moving back and forth like a heartbeat trying to keep rhythm with my thoughts. My name is Sweet Laurent, 35, journalist, mother, wife, or at least I thought I still was. I was on my way to pick up my 6-year-old daughter, Amélie, from her preschool. The traffic lights reflected red and gold over the wet pavement, blurring into the kind of evening that always made me think of quiet dinners at home. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I expected a short message from Julien, my husband, maybe reminding me to buy Amélie's favorite strawberry yogurt. Instead, the screen lit up with 12 words that froze my hands on the steering wheel. Moved to Lisbon with Sophie. Took the savings. Good luck with the rent. For a moment, everything went silent. 10 years of marriage collapsed into that single notification. 18,000 euros, years of night shifts, cancelled vacations, compromises, gone. The rain blurred the world outside as if even the city didn't want to look at me. When I finally reached the school, Amélie ran toward me, her curls damp from the drizzle. "Maman, did you bring the star cookies?" she asked, bright and innocent. I forced a smile so tight it hurt. "Not today, sweetheart. Maybe later." As I buckled her into the seat, I felt my pulse return, slow and heavy. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove, the message still glowing on the screen beside me. An obituary for the life I thought I had. I didn't know then that within days I would become someone I once feared. A woman who fights for the truth. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. I met Julien 12 years ago at a journalism conference in Paris. He was standing by the coffee counter, sleeves rolled up, notebook in hand, laughing at something a colleague said. I remember thinking he had the kind of smile that made you believe life could be simple, honest, even. He wasn't a journalist, though. He worked in finance, but he loved listening to stories. He told me he admired people who searched for truth. I was 23, idealistic, convinced that truth could change the world. So when he looked at me and said, "You must see life differently from everyone else," I believed him. We married 2 years later, in a small chapel outside Lyon. It was a quiet wedding, simple, full of light and plans. Julien promised me we'd build a life where both of us could grow. At that time, I was a rising reporter for Le Figaro, covering stories that kept me awake until dawn. He would wait up for me, half asleep, a glass of red wine in hand. I remember thinking, this is what partnership looks like, someone who waits, someone who believes. But life has a way of testing promises in small, silent ways. When I became pregnant with Amélie, I was offered an international assignment that could have changed my career. Julien smiled gently and said, "You'll have other chances. Our daughter will only be small once." I said yes, thinking sacrifice was just another word for love. I quit the newsroom, started writing freelance pieces, and spent my days between feedings and drafts. Julien thrived. Promotions came easily. Dinners with clients turned into late nights. He wore new suits, spoke of opportunities and expansions. I was proud, even when loneliness began to visit like an uninvited guest. My stories still got published, but my name felt smaller on the byline, like it was fading under the weight of domestic silence. The first cracks were small, barely noticeable. His phone, once left carelessly on the table, now carried a passcode. "Company policy," he said. Receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of appeared in his jacket pockets. "Client dinners," he explained, brushing off the details. Then came Sophie, his new assistant, bright, sharp, with the kind of confidence that reminded me of myself 10 years ago. At company events, Sophie always stood too close when she talked to Julien. Her laughter lingered, her eyes too certain. "You're imagining things," he said once, annoyed that I even noticed. I told myself it was stress, not betrayal. That's what love does. It teaches you to rename the unbearable. Evenings changed. Julien started working later, showering before bed without a word. I'd sit on the couch, Amélie asleep beside me, typing half-heartedly on my laptop, pretending to be busy. Sometimes I'd hear him in the other room, whispering into his phone. The first time I asked who it was, he said, "Work." The second time he didn't answer. Still I stayed. Because leaving would mean admitting that the life I'd built, our home, our marriage, the story I told myself, was all an illusion. I thought of that often, how love turns into habit, and habit into denial. I kept writing, cooking, smiling for Amélie, believing that one day Julien would come home, not just physically but emotionally. When he said he had another client meeting, I just nodded, pressing my lips into a practiced smile, because by then I had learned that sometimes believing is the only way to survive. That night, after putting Amélie to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the dull hum of the refrigerator behind me. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed the password. The page loaded, slow as if the internet itself pitied me. Then it appeared, balance, €320.47. I blinked, refreshed the page, thinking it was a glitch. But it wasn't. The €18,000 we'd saved, the money from my late-night freelance articles, from Julien's bonuses, from the vacations we never took, was gone. Completely gone. The rent for our apartment was due in 4 days. €2,200. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Until I couldn't tell if the moisture on my cheeks was from the rain I'd walked through earlier or from tears I didn't remember starting to cry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a journalist or a wife, just a woman cornered by betrayal. I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages, hoping there would be another one from him. An explanation. An apology. Anything. There was nothing. Only the echo of his last words. "Good luck with the rent." When the phone rang, my heart jumped. For a second I thought it might be Julien. But it was Madame Claudette, his mother. Her voice, crisp and sharp as glass, filled the quiet room. "Sweet, what on earth have you done?" Her tone carried no concern, only accusation. "Excuse me." I managed, though my voice was shaking. "Julien called," she continued. "He said you threatened to keep Amélie from him unless he gave you more money. I told him that was uncalled for, even for you." I went cold. "What? That's not true. He left. He took everything." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I saw the messages. You've always been dramatic, Sweet. Julien says you're unstable." Unstable. The word hit like a slap. My breath caught in my throat. "He took our savings, madam. He's in Lisbon with his assistant. Ask him about that." There was a pause, short, dismissive. Then she said, almost pitying, "You've always had such imagination. Goodbye, dear." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone, the sound of Amélie's soft breathing drifting in from her room. He hadn't just left. He had rewritten the story. Julien, the charming husband, now painted himself as the victim, and me as the hysterical wife. I realized, with a strange calmness, that he'd been preparing this narrative for months. The small lies, the missing receipts, the carefully planted doubts. All of it was groundwork for this moment. He didn't just want to leave. He wanted to destroy the version of me that existed before him. The competent journalist. The woman with instincts. The one who could see through deception. I opened our message thread, scrolling through years of words that once felt like home. "I'm proud of you. We'll make it together." They looked like lines from a script now, one he had stopped believing in long before I did. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand an explanation that would make the pieces fit. But there was only silence. And in that silence I understood something I hadn't before. Betrayal isn't just about losing someone. It's about losing the version of yourself that trusted them. I looked around the apartment we'd shared. Photos on the wall, Amélie's toys scattered across the floor, the wine glasses we'd bought in Provence. They all looked like evidence from a life that no longer existed. In the days that followed, I went through the motions. I made breakfast for Amélie, walked her to school, wrote pitches I couldn't focus on. Every time I logged into the bank account, the number €320 stared back like a cruel reminder. People think heartbreak is loud, screaming, crying, slamming doors. But the truth is quieter. It's the silence of realizing you have to pay rent with nothing. The silence of explaining to your daughter why her father isn't calling. And in that silence, something in me shifted. Because in that moment I finally understood. When a man leaves, he doesn't just take your money or your stability. He takes with him the way you used to believe in yourself. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought burning in my mind. I need answers. The lies, the silence, the missing money. None of it made sense. Julien wasn't reckless. He was calculated. And if he had planned this, then someone must have helped him. I dropped Amélie off at school, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd be back before lunch. Then I drove across town to Julien's office. A sleek building with mirrored glass and his name still faintly printed on the parking spot. Julien Morel, Senior Editor. I parked in his spot, the irony not lost on me. When I entered the lobby, the receptionist looked up with that tight, professional smile people wear when they already know bad news. Is Julien in? I asked, pretending to sound casual. She hesitated. Oh, didn't anyone tell you? Julien resigned last week. My stomach dropped. Resigned? Yes, she said, lowering her voice. He cleared out his office last Friday. Left no forwarding address. I felt my pulse in my ears. Do you know where he went? Before she could answer, a familiar voice called from down the hallway. Sweet. It was Pierre, Julien's colleague, someone I used to share lunch breaks with back when I still came here to bring him coffee. He looked uncomfortable, guilt written all over his face. I didn't expect to see you here, he said softly, ushering me into the corner near the elevators. Listen, I don't want to get involved, but maybe you deserve to know. He hesitated, then exhaled. Julien's been planning this for months. The move, the new job, the apartment in Lisbon. Sophie went with him. They've been, well, since last summer. It was like being punched in the chest. Since last summer? I whispered. Pierre nodded. He said he wanted a fresh start. That you'd be fine financially because you had your own savings. My throat went dry. My own savings? He took everything. Pierre frowned. He told HR you insisted on keeping the joint account under your control. Said you'd withdrawn most of it. A cold shiver ran through me. He hadn't just emptied our life. He'd rewritten it on paper too. Every lie backed up with forged perception. I left before my legs gave out under me. Outside, the city seemed louder, brighter, crueler. Rainwater shimmered on the pavement as I walked back to my car, each step heavier than the last. When I arrived home, a thick envelope was waiting in the mailbox, stamped registered legal document. I tore it open. Inside, neatly folded, was the letter I dreaded but knew would come. A divorce petition. My eyes scanned the lines until one sentence stopped me cold. Given the respondent's substantial personal savings and freelance income, no spousal support shall be required. I laughed short, hollow, disbelieving. Substantial savings? He was rewriting my life with lies that sounded reasonable enough for strangers to believe. I crumpled the paper in my hand and stormed to the study, the room we once shared, now stripped of his books, his presence, his scent. Only one drawer remained locked. I remembered Julien's habit of hiding spare keys under things he thought I'd never touch. I lifted the framed photo of our wedding day, and there it was, just like always, a small silver key taped to the back. The drawer slid open with a reluctant groan. Inside, receipts, old boarding passes, and a neatly folded thank you card written in his handwriting but addressed not to me, to his mother, Claudette. My breath hitched as I read the message. For everything, Mammon. For helping me secure the Lisbon apartment. Couldn't have done it without you. Sophie sends her love. The room tilted. I had expected betrayal, but not this. She hadn't just believed his lies, she had funded them. I sat down slowly, the letter trembling in my hands. Images of our phone call the night before flashed in my mind. Her voice dripping with judgment, the way she'd called me unstable. It wasn't ignorance, it was performance. She already knew where he was. She had helped him disappear. My first instinct was to call her, to scream, to demand an explanation. But then I stopped. What would that change? The woman who had always found ways to remind me that I wasn't good enough. For her son had now made sure I couldn't even afford to fight back. I looked around the study again. On the shelf sat a photo of Claudette holding baby Amélie, smiling for the camera. Her smile seemed almost triumphant now. And for the first time I saw the full picture. Julien hadn't acted alone. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was a family operation. She had given him the means, the cover, the confidence to leave. The woman who had always pretended to love me like a daughter-in-law had been writing checks to help her son build a new life with another woman. I placed the letter on the desk, my hands shaking but my mind clearer than it had been in days. It was no longer just about a man who left. It was about a network of deception, and the realization that the person who'd handed me tea and called me dear at family dinners had been quietly handing him the keys to my ruin. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. Because the moment I read that card, something inside me hardened. Julien had taken my savings. Claudette had taken my peace. But neither of them had taken the one thing that would destroy them both: the truth. I met Sweet Laurent 2 days later, in a small office above a bakery on Rue Saint-Honoré. She was sharp-eyed, calm, and efficient, the kind of woman who made you feel like the storm could be contained if only you handed her the right documents. "I've seen cases like this before," she said after listening to everything. "But yours, this isn't just abandonment. It's premeditated fraud." We spent the next hours combing through every detail of my life with Julien. Every bank statement, message, and email became a thread in the tapestry of his deceit. I handed her screenshots of the texts he'd sent from Lisbon, photos of us smiling just a month before he disappeared, even receipts from the restaurants I now realized he'd shared with Sophie, not me. Camille's tone never wavered. "We'll prove he moved assets intentionally. The court won't tolerate financial manipulation. Not with the child involved." It was the first time in weeks someone had said we. Meanwhile, my parents stepped in quietly, their support as steady as the ground I thought I'd lost. My father wired enough money to cover rent and groceries. My mother arrived with Amelie's favorite soup and that look, the one mothers give when words can't fix anything but presence can. For the first time I slept through the night. But inside me something darker had awakened. A need to understand how deep Julien's plan went. I remembered the old laptop he used for freelance projects, one he'd left behind thinking it was broken. I took it to a friend who worked in IT. Within an hour he had it running again. At first it was just the usual chaos of files, drafts, invoices, photos. Then I saw a folder titled, Lisbon Move Logistics. My breath caught. I opened it. Inside were scanned documents. A rental contract for an apartment in Barro Alto, 2 plane tickets, and an email exchange with a lawyer in Portugal discussing custody adjustments. Custody. I scrolled further and found a series of drafts. Notes he had written about my mental instability after giving birth, fabricated stories meant to depict me as an unfit mother. In one file, he even mentioned consulting with a therapist to document my supposed depression. My vision blurred. He hadn't just left me. He had planned to use my postpartum vulnerability, those sleepless nights, those moments of exhaustion, as ammunition. He wanted to take Amélie not just from our home but from me. And then I found it. A document labeled Zurich account. Inside was a screenshot of a Swiss bank statement. The balance, 50,000 euros. I stared at the number, my pulse pounding in my ears. This was the missing money, hidden offshore, safe from French jurisdiction, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. I printed everything, every file, every email, every transaction. Camille's face hardened when I showed her. "This changes everything," she said. "We can prove intent to defraud and child endangerment. He's not just a runaway husband. He's a strategist." I sat there, hands trembling, realizing the full magnitude of what he'd done. He hadn't simply betrayed me. He had engineered my collapse, financially, emotionally, maternally. All those months he watched me struggle with exhaustion, with the fog of early motherhood. He was already writing his version of the story, where he was the sane, stable parent, and I was the fragile one who couldn't cope. I leaned back, breathing hard, feeling the sharp edge of fury where grief used to be. "He didn't just betray me," I whispered. "He designed a plan to erase me, as a woman, as a partner, and as a mother." Camille met my gaze, steady and cold. "Then we'll make him regret underestimating you." For the first time I believed it. It was late afternoon when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, until I saw the message preview. "Sweet, it's Sophie. Please don't hang up. I need your help." For a moment I just stared at the screen, stunned. The woman who had destroyed my marriage was now reaching out to me. My first instinct was disgust, my second was curiosity. I answered. Her voice trembled on the other end. "Julien's not who you think he is. she said quickly, her breath uneven. He lied to me too. He said he'd transferred money into a joint account for us, 250,000 euros, but it's gone. He moved it without telling me. He's planning to come back to Lyon next week. I let the silence stretch. You expect me to feel sorry for you? No, she whispered. I expect you to believe that you're not his only victim. Her words lodged in my chest like a splinter. There was fear in her tone, not guilt, not manipulation. Fear. I turned to look at Camille, who was reviewing documents at my kitchen table. I covered the phone's mic and said quietly, "It's her. Sophie. She says he's stolen from her too." Camille's eyes narrowed. "Put her on speaker." I did. Sophie's story came out in fragments. After Julien moved to Lisbon, he convinced her that Claudette would handle the paperwork for a trust account in Luxembourg. Sophie had believed him until she logged in and saw the balance was zero. The funds had been transferred to a separate account under Julien's name alone. He said it was just temporary, she continued, her voice cracking. But then he started disappearing. No calls, no explanations. I think he's planning to leave both of us. I almost laughed bitterly. Welcome to the club. But Camille leaned forward. Sophie, she said evenly, if you can prove what you're saying, we can protect you. We can also make sure Julien faces real consequences. Are you willing to cooperate? There was a long pause. Then Sophie said, yes, but I want immunity, no charges, no press. I'll give you everything if you promise that. Camille's pen was already moving. Done. I'll draft a conditional immunity agreement. You'll sign, and then you'll deliver the evidence. Within an hour, the email came through. A bundle of files compressed into one encrypted folder. Sophie had sent bank statements from Luxembourg, showing transfers between Julien's accounts and Claudette's. Attached were screenshots of messages, dozens of them, between Julien and his mother, plotting the timing of withdrawals and discussing public image management for the divorce. In one text, Claudette had written, "Keep the narrative clean. Sweet is unstable, Sophie is discreet. We protect family assets at all costs." It was the first time I had physical proof of their conspiracy, and the first time I saw Sophie not as a rival, but as another pawn in Julien's carefully constructed empire of lies. Camille reviewed the files, her eyes flickering with both admiration and rage. "This is gold," she said. "With this we can expose the entire scheme. Financial manipulation, defamation, and collusion." I sat there, the weight of the revelation pressing against my ribs. The woman who had helped destroy my marriage had just handed me the keys to his downfall. "Why are you doing this?" I asked softly. Sophie hesitated. "Because I finally realized what he is. He doesn't love anyone. He only collects people until they're empty." Her voice broke. "And because you're the only one who still has the courage to fight him." For the first time I felt no anger toward her, only clarity. The betrayal that had once divided us had now united us against a greater enemy. As Camille filed the evidence, I looked at the folder bearing both their names, Julien and Claudette, and felt a quiet certainty rise within me. The story had changed. The mistress had become the witness. And together, we were about to bring down the man who had underestimated every woman in his life. The courtroom in Lyon was heavy with the scent of polished wood and tension. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the windows streaked with light that filtered through the gray morning. I sat beside Camille, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, watching as Julien entered with his lawyer, a man in a dark suit who looked more nervous than confident. Claudette followed, elegant as ever, her pearls perfectly aligned, her expression a mixture of disdain and denial. When the session began, Camille stood. Her tone was steady, surgical. "Your Honor, today we present irrefutable evidence of financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and intentional defamation against my client, Sweet Laurent." She clicked a remote, and the projector illuminated the wall behind her. Screenshots of Julien's text messages, bank transfers to Lisbon, and the correspondence between him and Claudette. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. Each message, each transaction was a blade slicing through Julien's polished facade. Then came the Luxembourg statements, Sophie's files. The judge leaned forward as Camille spoke. "These documents show coordination between Mr. Julien Moreau and his mother, Mrs. Claudette Moreau, To conceal over €300,000 and fabricate a false narrative of mental instability against Ms. Laurent. Julien's lawyer stammered. Your Honor, these are private family matters. Camille cut him off. Fraud is not a family matter. It is a crime. Julien's face went pale. Claudette, for the first time, looked uncertain. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled tightly into a bun, adjusted her glasses and turned to me. Ms. Laurent, you have endured significant hardship as a result of these actions. Do you have anything to say before we proceed? I rose slowly, my voice calm. Only that I want my daughter safe. That's all. The judge nodded, then delivered her decision. Julien's assets were frozen, and I was granted temporary full custody of Amélie. Julien's visitation would be supervised by a court-appointed social worker. Claudette was placed under investigation for false testimony and aiding financial misconduct. Julien slammed his palm on the table, his voice breaking. You can't take my daughter from me. The judge's gavel struck once. You took your family's dignity first, Mr. Moreau. This court merely restores balance. But the final twist arrived 2 days later. An HR director from Julien's company in Lisbon called to verify a strange detail. Ms. Laurent, she said, we dismissed Mr. Moreau due to an email, apparently from you, containing defamatory documents. But our IT team confirmed the sender's IP address. It came from Geneva. Geneva, Claudette's home. The woman who had stood beside her son in court had been the one to destroy his career behind his back. It wasn't justice, it was poetic symmetry. When Julien returned to Lyon to resolve things, the police were waiting. The court had already issued a restraining order. He was detained at Saint-Exupéry Airport, furious and defeated. The day the order was finalized, I picked Amélie up from school. She ran into my arms, laughing, her hair catching the afternoon sun that streamed through the glass windows of the hallway. For the first time in months, I felt air fill my lungs without weight. I held her close and whispered, We're safe now, my love. The light through the window glowed warm against our faces, like a quiet promise that justice, however late, had finally found its way home. Autumn arrived softly in Lyon, brushing the old stone walls of View Lyon with a golden hue. I had just signed the papers for a small apartment near the river. A modest 2-bedroom space with creaky floors, sunlight-drenched windows, and a balcony that smelled faintly of rain and lavender. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The walls were soon covered with Amélie's drawings. Suns with crooked smiles, families holding hands, stars with blue wings. Every color she used felt like a small act of healing. At night, after she fell asleep, I would sit at the wooden desk by the window and write again. Words became my compass, my resistance. Le Monde offered me a freelance column, one focused on justice, women, and the quiet courage it takes to start over. I wrote about broken systems and invisible battles, about how truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers until someone listens. My articles gained traction, not for their rage but for their resilience. Every story I told helped me reclaim a piece of myself Julien had tried to erase. Life had slowed into something deliberate. Mornings began with coffee and the smell of toast. Amélie would hum while tying her shoelaces, and I'd smile at her reflection in the mirror. A reflection of everything I fought for. There were still hard days, of course. Letters from lawyers, reminders of debts, echoes of a past that sometimes clawed its way into the present. But they no longer defined me. One evening, the city outside our window glowed with the light of 1,000 small lanterns. We were eating pasta at our tiny kitchen table, Amélie's favorite, when she looked up, her blue eyes curious. Maman, she asked softly, will Papa ever come back? I set down my fork. The question didn't sting this time. I brushed a curl from her forehead and smiled. We don't need to know that, sweetheart, I said gently. You and I, we're enough. She nodded, content, and went back to her pasta. For a long moment I just watched her. The way her laughter filled the apartment, light and unbroken. The rain began again outside, but it was different now, softer, like a memory that no longer hurt. I stood by the window, watching droplets gather on the glass, reflecting the flicker of our kitchen light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was living. Julien's last words to me, "Good luck with the rent," had once been a curse. Now they were a reminder of everything I'd built with my own strength. I had paid that rent. I had bought this home. I had rebuilt a life where love was no longer measured by loyalty to another, but by loyalty to myself. As Amélie drifted to sleep, I tucked her in and whispered, "We're home now." Outside, the bells of St. Jean Cathedral chimed softly, echoing through the narrow streets. The night air smelled of rain and fresh beginnings. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, the fragile, radiant peace of freedom. Sometimes betrayal doesn't kill love. It reveals who truly deserves it. No one can save you except yourself, especially when your enemy carries your last name. Money can be taken, but dignity and truth are untouchable. A strong mother is justice made visible for her child. And forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's refusing to let pain define who you are. Because in the end, survival isn't about starting over. It's about remembering that you never truly ended. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for every woman who has faced the sharp sting of betrayal and found the courage to rise again. Every click, every share helps amplify the voices of those who rebuilt their lives from fragments, who refused to let deceit define their worth, and who discovered strength they never knew they had. This is for the mothers, daughters, and sisters reclaiming their power, one step at a time. Thank you for listening, for witnessing, and for honoring the journey of resilience and hope that every survivor deserves.